Agnes D. Kingston. Chapter 13. Captain Hood's Prowess. The remainder of the day and the next night were quietly spent in the camp. After all our fatigue and danger, this rest was well earned. We had no longer before us the rich plains of the kingdom of Odi. Steamhouse had now to pass through Rohilkund, a fertile territory, though much cut up by nullahs or ravines. Bareilly is the capital of this province, which is 155 miles square, well watered by the numerous affluents or tributaries to the Kogra. Here and there are many groups of magnificent mango trees, as well as thick jungles, which latter are gradually disappearing as cultivation advances. After the taking of Delhi, this was the centre of the insurrection. Sir Colin Campbell conducted one of his campaigns here. Here, too, Brigadier Walpole's column was not at the outset very fortunate, and here also fell a friend of Sir Edward Munro, the colonel of the 93rd Highlanders, who had so distinguished himself in the 2 assaults on Lucknow during the affair of the 14th of April. We could not have had a country better suited for the advance of our train than this. Beautiful level roads, easily crossed streams, running from the 2 more important arteries descending from the north, all united to render this part of our journey pleasant. In a short time we should come to the first rising ground which connected the plain with the mountains of Nepal. We had, however, to think seriously about the rainy season. The monsoon, which is prevalent from the northeast to the southwest during the first months of the year, is now reversed. The rainy season is more violent on the coast than in the interior of the peninsula, and also a little later, the reason being that the clouds are exhausted before reaching the centre of India. Besides this, their direction is somewhat altered by the barrier of high mountains, which form a sort of atmospheric eddy. On the coast of Malabar, the monsoon begins in the month of May. In the central and northern provinces, it is felt some weeks later on, in June. We were now in June, and our journey was henceforward to be performed under new, though well foreseen, circumstances. I should have said before that honest Gwami, who had been disarmed by the lightning in such an untoward manner, was nearly well again by the next day. The paralysis of his left leg was merely temporary. Soon not a trace of his accident remained, but it seemed to me that he always bore rather a grudge against that storm. On both the 6th and 7th of June, Captain Hood, aided by Fan and Niger, had better sport. He killed a couple of those antelopes called nilghaus. They are the blue oxen of the Hindus, though it is certainly more correct to call them deer, since they have a greater resemblance to that animal than to the congeners of the god Apis. They may better be described as pearl-grey deer, for their colour is more like a stormy than an azure sky. It is, however, asserted that some of these magnificent creatures, with little sharp straight horns on their long slightly convex heads, have really almost blue coats, a tint which nature appears to have invariably refused to quadrupeds, even to the blue fox, whose fur is rather black than blue. These were not the wild beasts Captain Hood hoped for, but all the same, the nilghau, though not actually ferocious, is dangerous, for when slightly wounded, it turns on the hunter. A shot from the captain, and a second from Fox, stopped short both of these superb creatures, killed as it were on the wing, and indeed Fox seemed to look on them as nothing higher than feathered game. Monsieur Parasard, fortunately, was quite of another opinion, and the excellent haunch, cooked to a turn, which he served up to us that day at dinner, brought us all over to his side. At daybreak on the 8th of June, we left an encampment we had made near a little village in Rohilkund. We had arrived at it the evening before, after traversing the 25 miles which lay between it and Rewa. Our train could only go at a very moderate pace over the heavy ground caused by the rains. Besides this, the streams began to swell, and fording several delayed us some hours. After all, we had not now so very far to go. we were sure of reaching the mountainous region before the end of June. There we intended to install steam-house for several of the summer months, as if in the midst of a sanatorium. We had nothing to make us uneasy in that respect. On the 8th of June, Captain Hood missed a fine opportunity for a shot. The road was bordered by thick bamboo jungle, as is often the case near villages, which look as if built in a basket of flowers. This was not yet the true jungle, for that, in the Hindu sense, applies to the rugged, bare and sterile plain, dotted with lines of grey bushes. We, on the contrary, were in a cultivated country, in the midst of a fertile territory covered in most places with marshy rice grounds. Behemoth went quietly along, guided by Storr's hand, and emitting graceful, feathery clouds of vapour, which curled away and dispersed among the bamboos at the roadside. All at once, out leapt an animal with the most wonderful agility, and fastened on our elephant's neck. "A cheetah! A cheetah!" shouted the engine-driver. At this cry Captain Hood darted out to the balcony and seized his gun, always ready and always at hand. "A cheetah!" he exclaimed in his turn. "Fire, then!" cried I. "Time enough," returned the captain, who contented himself with merely taking a good aim at the animal. A cheetah is a species of leopard peculiar to India, not so large as the tiger, but almost as formidable. It is so active, supple and strong. Colonel Munro, Banks and I stood out on the veranda, watching with interest for the captain to fire. The leopard had evidently been deceived by the sight of our elephant. He had boldly sprung at him, expecting to bury his teeth and claws in living flesh, but instead of that met with an iron skin, on which neither teeth nor claws could make any impression. Furious at his discomfiture, he clung to the long ears of the artificial animal, and was no doubt preparing to bound off again when he caught the sight of us. Captain Hood kept his gun pointed after the manner of a hunter who is sure of his aim, but does not wish to fire until he is certain he can hit a vital part. The cheetah drew himself up, roaring savagely. It no doubt knew of its danger, but did not attempt to escape. Perhaps it watched for an opportunity to spring on to the veranda. Indeed, we soon saw it climbing up the elephant's head, to the trunk or chimney, and almost to the opening, out of which puffed jets of vapour. "Now fire, Hood," said I again. "There is time enough," answered the captain. Then, without taking his eyes off the leopard, who still gazed at us, he addressed himself to me. "Did you ever kill a cheetah, Mockler?" he asked. "Never." "Would you like to kill one?" "Captain," I replied, "I should not like to deprive you of this magnificent shot." "Pooh," returned Hood, "it's nothing of a shot. Take a gun and aim just below the beast's shoulder. If you miss, I shall catch him as he springs." "Be it so, then." Fox, who had joined us, put a double-barreled gun into my hands. I took it, cocked it, aimed just below the leopard's shoulder, and fired. The animal, wounded, though but slightly, took an enormous bound right over the driver's howdah and alighted on the first roof of steam-house. Skilled sportsman as Captain Hood was, not even he had time to fire. "Here, Fox, after me!" he shouted. And the two, darting out of the veranda, hastened up into the howdah. The leopard immediately sprang onto the second roof, clearing the footbridge at a bound. The captain was now on the point of firing, but another desperate leap carried the animal off the roof and landed him at the side of the road, when he instantly disappeared in the jungle. "Stop! Stop!" cried Banks to the engineer, who, applying the atmospheric brakes, brought the train to an instant standstill. The captain and Fox leaped out and ran into the thicket, in hopes of finding the cheetah. A few minutes passed. We listened somewhat impatiently. No shot was fired, and very soon the two hunters returned empty-handed. "Disappeared! Got clear off!" called out Captain Hood, "and not even a trace of blood on the grass." "It was my fault," said I. "It would have been better if you had fired at the cheetah yourself. You wouldn't have missed." Nonsense, returned Hood. You hit him, I'm certain, though not in a good place. The beast wasn't fated to be my 39th, nor your 41st, Captain, remarked Fox, much out of countenance. Rubbish, said Hood, in a somewhat affected tone of indifference. A cheetah isn't a tiger. If it had been, my dear Mockler, I couldn't have made up my mind to yield that shot to you. Come to the table, my friends, said Colonel Munro. Breakfast is ready and will console you. I hope it may, put in McNeil, but it was all Fox's fault. My fault? Said the man, quite nonplussed by this unexpected observation. Certainly, Fox, returned the sergeant. The gun you handed to Mr. Mockler was only loaded with number 6. And McNeil held out a second cartridge, which he had just withdrawn, to prove his words. Fox, said Captain Hood. Yes, sir. A couple of days under arrest. Yes, Captain. And Fox retired to his cabin, resolved not to appear again for 48 hours. He was quite ashamed of himself and wished to hide his disgraced head. The next day Captain Hood, Guomi, and I went off to beat about the plain at the side of the road, and thus to spend the half-day's halt which Banks allowed us. It rained all the morning, but about midday the sky cleared, and we hoped for a few hours of fine weather. I must mention that it was not Hood, the hunter of wild beasts, who took me out this time, but the sportsman in search of game. In the interests of the table, he intended to stroll quietly about the rice-fields, accompanied by Fan and Niger. Monsieur Parasard had hinted to the captain that his larder was empty, and that he expected his honour to take the necessary measures to fill it again. Captain Hood resigned himself, and we set out. For 2 hours our battue had no other result than to put up a few partridges, or scare away a few hares, but all at such a distance that, notwithstanding our good dogs, we had no chance of hitting them. Captain Hood became utterly disgusted. In this vast plain, without jungles or thickets, and dotted with villages and farms, he had no great hopes of meeting any sort of wild beast, which would make amends for the loss of the leopard the preceding day. He had only come out now in the character of purveyor, and thought of the reception Monsieur Parasard would give him if he returned with an empty bag. It was not our fault that even by 4 o'clock we had not had occasion to fire a single shot. A dry wind blew, and, as I said, all the game rose out of range. My dear fellow, said Hood, this won't do at all. When I left Calcutta I promised you such grand sport, and all this time bad luck, fatality, I don't know what to call it, nor how to understand it, has prevented me from keeping my promise. Come, Captain, I replied, you mustn't despair. Though I do regret it, it is more on your account than my own. We shall have better luck, no doubt, on the hills. Yes, said Hood, on the Himalayan slopes we shall set to work under more favourable conditions. You see, Mockler, I'd wager anything that our train, with all its apparatus, its steam and its roaring, and especially the gigantic elephant, terrifies the confounded brutes much more than a railway train would do, and that's the reason we don't see anything of them when travelling. When we halt, we must hope to be more lucky. That leopard was a fool. He must have been starving when he sprang on Behemoth. He was worthy of being killed outright by a good shot. Hang that fellow Fox. I shan't forget that little job of his in a hurry. What time is it now? Nearly 5 o'clock. 5 already, and we haven't bagged a thing. They won't expect us back in camp till 7. Perhaps by that time— No, luck is against us, exclaimed the captain. And look you, luck is the half of success. Perseverance too, I answered. Suppose we agree that we won't go back empty-handed. Will that suit you? Suit me? Of course it will. Agreed, then. Look here, Mockler, I shall carry back a mouse or a squirrel rather than be forsworn. Hood, Guomi, and I were now in a frame of mind to attack anything. The chase was continued with a perseverance worthy of a better cause, but it seemed as if even the most inoffensive birds had become aware of our hostile intentions. We couldn't get near a single one. We roamed about thus among the rice fields, beating first one side of the road and then the other, and turning back again so as not to get too far from the camp. All was useless. 6:30, and we had not had to reload our guns. We might as well have had walking sticks in our hands. The result would have been all the same. I glanced at Captain Hood. He was marching along with his teeth set, while a deep frown on his brow betrayed his angry feelings. Between his compressed lips he muttered I don't know what vain menaces against every living creature, whether feathered or furred, of which there was not a specimen on the plain. He would probably soon fire his gun at the first object which met his eye, a tree or rock maybe, rather a cynical way of getting rid of his anger. It was easy to see his weapon burned his fingers, as it were, from the way he shifted it about, now to his shoulder, then to his arm, now again carrying it in his hand. Guomi looked at him. "The captain will be in a passion if this goes on," he said to me, shaking his head. "Yes," I replied, "I'd willingly give 30 shillings for the most modest little tame pigeon, if some charitable hand would let it go within range. It would appease him." But neither for 30 shillings, nor for double, nor triple that amount, could we procure even the cheapest or the most common of fowl. The country seemed deserted, and we saw neither farm nor village. Indeed, if it had been possible, I believe I should have sent Guomi to buy at any price some bird or other, if only a plucked chicken, anything to set our fretful captain free from his vow. Night was coming on. In an hour's time there would not be light enough for us to continue our fruitless expedition. Although we had agreed not to return to camp without something, yet we should be forced to do so, unless we meant to stay out all night. Not only did it threaten rain, but Colonel Munro and Banks would be seriously alarmed if we did not reappear. Captain Hood, with straining eyeballs, glancing from right to left with bird-like quickness, walked 10 paces ahead in opposite direction to that of Steamhouse. I was thinking of hastening my steps so as to rejoin him and beg him not to continue this struggle against ill luck, when a whir of wings was heard on my right. I looked towards the spot. A dark mass was rising slowly above a thicket. Instantly, without giving Captain Hood time to turn round, I levelled my gun and fired both barrels successively. The unknown bird fell heavily. Fan sprang forward, seized and brought it to the captain. "At last!" exclaimed Hood. "If Monsieur Parsard isn't contented with this, he must be shoved into his pot himself, head first." "But is it an edible bird?" I asked. "Certainly, for want of anything better," answered the captain. "It was lucky nobody saw you, Mr. Mockler," said Guomi. "What have I done wrong?" "Why, you've killed a peacock, and that is forbidden, for they are sacred birds all over India." "The fiend fly away with sacred birds and those who made them sacred too," exclaimed Captain Hood impatiently. "This one is killed at all events, and we shall eat him, devoutly if you like, but devour him somehow." Since the expedition of Alexander into this peninsula, the peacock has been a sacred animal in the Brahmins' country. The Hindus make it the emblem of the goddess Saravasti, who presides over births and marriages. To destroy this bird is forbidden under pain of punishment, which the English law has confirmed. This one, which so rejoiced Captain Hood's heart, was a magnificent specimen, with green metallic gleaming wings edged with gold. His beautifully marked tail formed a superb fan of silky feathers. "All right, forward," said the captain. "Tomorrow, Monsieur Parsard will give us peacock for dinner, in spite of what all the Brahmins in India may think. Although, when cooked, this bird will indeed only look like a somewhat pretentious chicken, yet with its feathers artistically arranged, it will have a fine effect on our table." Then you are satisfied, Captain? Satisfied? With you, yes, my dear fellow, but not pleased with myself at all. My bad luck isn't over yet, and I must do away with it. Come along. Off we started to retrace our steps to the camp, now about 3 miles distant. Captain Hood and I walked close together along a winding path through thick bamboo jungles, Guomi carrying our game, bringing up the rear. The sun had not yet disappeared, but it was shrouded in great clouds, so that we had to find our way through semi-obscurity. All at once a terrific roar burst from a thicket on our right. The sound was to me so awful that I stopped short, almost in spite of myself. Captain Hood grasped my hand. "A tiger," he said. Then an oath escaped him. "Thunder and lightning," he exclaimed. "There is only small shot in our guns." It was too true. Neither Hood, Guomi, or I had any ball cartridges. Besides, if we had, we should not have had time to reload. 10 seconds after uttering his first roar, the animal leaped from the covert with a single bound and landed on the road 20 paces from us. It was a magnificent tiger, what the Hindus would have called a man-eater. His annual victims might no doubt be counted by hundreds. The situation was terrible. I gazed at the tiger and must confess that my gun trembled in my hand. He measured from 9 to 10 feet in length and was a tawny color, striped with black and white. He stared back at us, his cat-like eyes blazing in the shadow. His tail feverishly lashed his sides. He crouched, as if about to spring. Hood had not lost his presence of mind. He took a careful aim at the animal, muttering in a tone which it is impossible to describe, "Number 6, to fire at a tiger with number 6. If I don't hit him right in the eyes, we are—" The captain had not time to finish. The tiger advanced not by leaps, but slow steps. Guomi crouched behind us, and also took aim, though his gun too only contained small shot. As to mine, it wasn't even loaded. I prepared to do this now. "Not a movement, not a sound," muttered the captain. "The tiger will spring, and that will never do." We all three remained motionless. The tiger advanced slowly, his eyes glaring fixedly, and his great jaws held almost level with the ground. The brute was now only 10 paces from the captain. Hood stood firm, steady as a statue, concentrating his whole life in his gaze. The terrible struggle which was about to take place, and which might leave none of us alive, did not even make his heart beat more rapidly than usual. I thought the tiger was about to make his spring. He took 5 steps. I had need of all my self-control to keep from calling out, "Fire, Hood, now fire!" No, the captain had said, and it was evidently his only chance, that he meant to blind the animal, and to do that he must be very close before he fired. The tiger came 3 paces nearer, and prepared to spring. A loud report was heard, almost immediately followed by a second. The second explosion seemed to have taken place in the very body of the animal, which after 2 or 3 starts and roars of pain fell dead on the ground. "Wonderful!" exclaimed Captain Wood. "My gun was loaded with ball after all, and what's more, with an explosive ball. Oh, thanks, Fox, this time, many thanks." "Is it possible?" I cried. "Look for yourself." And as he spoke, the captain drew out the cartridge from the other barrel. There was the ball. All was explained. Captain Hood possessed a double-barreled rifle and a double-barreled gun, all of the same caliber. Now, when Fox made the mistake of loading the rifle with small shot, he at the same time put explosive ball cartridges into the other. The day before, this mistake saved the life of the leopard. Today it saved ours. "Yes," remarked Hood, "and never in my life have I been nearer death." Half an hour afterwards, when we were safe back in camp, Hood called up Fox and told him what had happened. "Captain," returned the man, "that proves that instead of 2 days of confinement, I deserved 4, because I made a mistake twice." "That is my opinion," replied his master, "but since through your mistake I have bagged my 41st, it is also my opinion that I should offer you this sovereign." "And mine, that I should take it," answered Fox, pocketing the piece of gold. Such were the incidents which marked Captain Hood's encounter with his 41st tiger. In the evening of the 12th of June our train came to a halt near a small village of no importance, and the next day we set out to begin the 90 miles which still lay between us and the mountains of Nepal. End of chapter 13.